A potential target for the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen has been revealed, and it's a very interesting name that is still playing in the playoffs as we speak, and he's been a vital piece to what the Los Angeles Dodgers are doing. So we'll break down that potential signing and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in everybody to Jays Digest. I'm your host Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, there's still baseball going on, but it's looking like a series we thought was going to be an all-timer between the Yankees and the Dodgers. It's not really trending in that direction anymore. Dodgers took a 3-0 lead yesterday. Yankees look clueless up there in the batter's box. I mean, looks like we're watching the Toronto Blue Jays, so maybe we could rally behind the Yankees right now. But we know that the Blue Jays bullpen needs some help. They need to acquire that help, whether it's in the trade market, in the free agent market, wherever it may be. There is a dire need for them to improve what they got going on over there. And one specific target has been revealed here. He's on the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's been crucial to getting them within one game of winning a World Series. And he's a bit on the older side, but definitely a veteran that knows his way around high intensity baseball.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because the bullpen is their biggest priority heading into the offseason, along with offense, of course. And that target, and there's a sneak peek of the bullpen there, is Blake Treinen. And Treinen is set to become a free agent once the World Series ends. And while he's far from the best relief pitcher on the market, he'll surely be garnering plenty of interest from teams around the league, including the Blue Jays. And Jim Bowden basically came out and said Treinen should be receiving a contract worth about $17 million on a 2-year term after the season he has put together. And he said, while his age might turn some people off, Treinen will be an invaluable veteran presence and experience to a rebuilt bullpen. He has 80 career saves, 38 saves season in 2018, 103 career holds. Now, Peter, Treinen's coming off of some very solid years there. You look at the stats on the left. Since 2021, he hasn't had a season with above a 2 ERA, and again, 50 games this year, struggled with injuries in 2022, also didn't play in 2023, which is another interesting thing here to keep in mind, but he's been a very good relief pitcher for a very long time, and this is an interesting one surrounding the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen. We're going to dive into the bullpen a little bit, do a little bit of a deep dive into it because it's not very good right now. They're going to need to sign relief pitchers. The question is, what risk are they willing to take? And according to Jim Bowden, at 2 years, $17 million, it's not a bad contract for me, even though he is injury prone and aging.
Yeah, it's not a bad contract, but he is 36 years old and he has dealt with injuries in the past. And this is totally against the grain of what the Toronto Blue Jays usually do. They don't necessarily sign free agents in terms of relief pitching. I think the last one that I could remember off the top of my head was maybe Kirby Yates a couple of years ago in 2021, but that was a 1 year deal. And then we all know Kirby Yates hurt himself in spring training, stepping on a sprinkler head. So that was unfortunate. Maybe that deters the Blue Jays away from ever signing an aging relief pitcher again. Who knows? But it's not something that they typically do. They tend to try to get those guys internally or through the trade market. And I think there are some options internally that the Blue Jays can look at that could maybe make the jump from minor league baseball to the majors. However, Treinen is one of the more reliable names on the market right now. I think he could definitely be a piece that the Blue Jays should target. But at 36 years old, probably going to win a World Series with the Dodgers, it might be tough to pry him away from that situation, which means you'll probably have to overpay to sway him out of Los Angeles, which I don't think the Blue Jays are going to be willing to do. And it's something that I wouldn't be willing to do for a guy with his injury history and his age combination. He's a great pitcher. Don't get me wrong. His slider absolutely falls off the table, and it's a beauty to watch. Like he just baffles those New York Yankee hitters and pretty much any hitter that steps into the game. It's just not something that the Blue Jays tend to usually do.
Yeah, and you can see on the right their movement profile. He has sweeper, he has sinker, cutter, four seam. Very good pitcher. The problem is, like you mentioned, aging is going to require a lot of money depending how the market goes. We saw predictions last year at this time before free agency opened, and things ended up getting a lot less expensive for some players, more expensive for others. So it's always up in the air. And again, coming off of a great season, 1.93 ERA in 46 innings, he would help the Blue Jays. That being said, I'm not sure if that's the route they want to go. I mean, they're not like they're going to try to win the World Series next year. In theory, that's what Ross Atkins said, but I don't think they're there yet unless they make some big moves. And maybe this signing would make sense if they get a guy like Juan Soto or they get some of the bigger fish on the market, which is wishful thinking. But if something like that happens, then maybe you go and you overpay for a guy who can help
Yeah.
you right now. But otherwise, it doesn't make a ton of sense. And you can see this here, their bullpen right now. And Peter, we've been discussing it for a while. It was a problem in their team last year. I mean, you have Jordan Romano, Chad Green, Genesis Cabrera, Eric Swanson. Those are your top four. And then you have some other guys. Dylan Tate was signed to a minor league deal, came up and played for the Blue Jays a little bit. Ryan Yarbrough is a pending free agent, unrestricted free agent. He had a phenomenal season. I think there's a chance they bring him back as well. That was one of the more underrated trades at the deadline for Ross Atkins. Obviously, it didn't lead to wins necessarily in the sense of playoff wins, but getting Ryan Yarbrough for Kevin Kiermaier ended up being a steal for the Jays. He ate a ton of innings, sub 2.5 ERA. And then, of course, you have guys like Bowden Francis and some guys in the pipeline as well that failed starters can be turned to relievers.
Yeah.
So there is some upside here, but this is not a winning playoff team's bullpen as currently constructed.
No, it's not. But I also liked what I saw out of Brandon Little at times last year, and him being a lefty, I think gives him an advantage too. So there are some names and some pieces to build around going forward. And again, I know Romano was really struggling before he went out with injury, but let's not forget that he has been one of the most consistent closers in baseball. And whether you like him or not, whether you like his two pitch mix or not, you can't deny the statistics that he is one of the more reliable closers in baseball. It may not look pretty at times, it may feel shaky as a Blue Jay fan, but the numbers don't lie, man. They don't lie. And there is nothing you could say to me to convince me otherwise that Romano is not a very good reliever in the game right now. Is he an elite closer? I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but he's definitely an above average one and definitely someone that the Blue Jays desperately missed last year. So him not being there for the majority of the season really probably cost them a lot of wins and just not having that safety blanket, I guess, at the back end of the bullpen. And Eric Swanson, too, who was dominant in the previous two seasons. He had a rough one last year, but there was a lot going on for him off the field. There was just a lot on his mind. The injury stints. It was a rough year for Swanson. I think he's going to get back into a good rhythm starting spring training and be able to regain some of that magic that made him one of the more reliable setup men in baseball. But there are some pieces. There are some elements to this foundation of the Blue Jays bullpen, but there's no doubt that they need to add maybe another power arm or two because I think the complementary guys are there. I think Chad Green is solid as a middle relief guy or maybe as a seventh inning guy. I think Eric Swanson, same sort of thing. I don't know if he's an eighth inning guy, but he can definitely be that middle for you. And Genesis Cabrera solid last season as well. Brandon Little, like we touched on. So there are some pieces there. Ryan Yarbrough, if they bring him back in long relief. I like that list. I like that foundation that they're building. But I wouldn't say no to a guy at the caliber of Blake Treinen to come in and eat some of those high leverage outs.
Yeah, and the upside, there's a lot of guys that could be very good. Whether that's Chad Green being elite, Jordan Romano turning back to the arm he was throughout his entire career, or even Eric Swanson. He helped the Jays push to a playoff run in 2023. So a lot of different guys there. It's ultimately going to be a matter of mixing them in as well as some of the new additions. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on the Blake Treinen report. It's a very interesting one. The Jays have a lot of work to do, and it's going to start very soon as it looks like the Yankees might get swept in the World Series, which is a little bit interesting. We'll say the first time in a very long time, over a decade. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know what your thoughts are. See you later.